The Élysée Palace has hosted legendary kings, powerful queens, and prominent world leaders throughout its 300 years of grand history. But when French President Emmanuel Macron heard that Alex Eala had arrived in Paris on the eve of the 2026 French Open, the entire political and sporting schedule was instantly shattered. According to exclusive palace insiders, the French president cleared his entire diplomatic schedule for a private, highly confidential evening that has now left the tennis world searching for answers and completely losing control of the narrative. Presidents do not usually invite young tennis stars to exclusive dinners behind heavily guarded palace walls, nor do they send official presidential limousines to luxury hotels, or spend hours speaking privately with a 20-year-old athlete from Manila about her grueling journey, her deepest dreams, and the millions of people she proudly represents across the globe. Yet, on the eve of the season's second Grand Slam tournament, Macron reportedly did exactly that in a private meeting that lasted nearly 3 hours without a single camera allowed inside the historic walls. Whispers from the palace have already begun spreading like a wildfire across Paris, describing what was offered during that midnight meeting as something completely unprecedented in the history of professional sports. Filipino fans around the world are calling this the ultimate validation for everything Alex Eala has achieved, while rival players inside the WTA Tour are completely stunned by the sheer level of political and cultural attention surrounding her rapid rise. As for Eala herself, sources close to the young star say she described it as one of the most surreal and overwhelming nights of her entire life. It was May 23, 2026, at exactly 11:47 p.m. when a sleek black limousine with tinted windows, diplomatic license plates, and the unmistakable official seal of the French Republic arrived outside the luxurious Hotel de Crillon, and Alex Eala reportedly had absolutely no idea who was waiting inside. The bustling streets of Paris were still alive with electric French Open energy. Photographers crowded the entrances of elite hotels, and thousands of fans gathered in the cool night, hoping to catch a fleeting glimpse of the sport's biggest icons. But what happened next was something nobody in the tennis world could have ever anticipated. Eala had arrived in Paris to what can only be described as a hero's welcome, with passionate Filipino fans filling the airport terminal, waving massive flags, chanting her name, and celebrating her arrival as if she had already lifted the trophy. She had spent her day practicing diligently on Court 7, meeting with high-ranking officials from the French Tennis Federation, and was even honored with a special commemorative medal before the main draw had officially commenced. It deeply felt like the entire city of Paris had completely embraced her, but behind the flashing cameras and polite smiles, physical and emotional exhaustion was rapidly setting in. The long flight from her training base in Majorca had drained her energy, and hours of mandatory media interviews, photo shoots, and sponsor appearances had left her feeling physically worn down, compounded by the crushing pressure and expectations of millions of fans who firmly believed she could do something extraordinary on the clay of Roland Garros. By the time she finally retreated to her room at the Hotel de Crillon that night, all she desperately wanted was a full night of sleep, ordering routine room service, and taking a long hot shower to prepare for bed, when her phone suddenly buzzed with an urgent message from her agent, young Ichiko, telling her not to go to sleep because someone highly important was coming to see her immediately. Eala stared at the screen in complete confusion at nearly midnight on the eve of one of the biggest tournaments of her professional career, wondering who could possibly visit her at this hour. Curious and slightly nervous, she pulled on a sweater, brushed through her hair, and waited in total silence until 15 minutes later another message flashed, ordering her to come downstairs alone. The grand lobby of the Hotel de Crillon was unusually quiet at that late hour, with the concierge giving her a subtle, knowing nod as she walked past, and a security guard calmly opening the heavy glass doors leading outside into the Paris night where the diplomatic limousine sat waiting quietly at the curb. In that sharp moment, Eala realized this was absolutely not an ordinary tennis meeting, as the rear door slowly opened from the inside, and a sharply dressed government official stepped out into the light, calmly saying, "Miss Eala, please get in. The president is waiting." For a moment, the young phenom completely froze in disbelief, realizing that the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, was waiting for her at midnight. Her heart raced as she glanced back toward the hotel, toward the glowing windows of her mother's room, and toward the city of Paris stretching endlessly around her, thinking deeply about the thousands of Filipino fans who had crossed vast oceans just to watch her compete. The loud chants at the airport, and the massive Eala effect that had grown far beyond sports into an emotional, cultural movement that was impossible to ignore. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the luxurious interior of the limousine. The heavy door shut softly behind her, and the engine hummed to life as the car began gliding seamlessly through the midnight streets of Paris. Alex Eala, the 20-year-old phenom from Manila who had never even won a singles main draw match at Roland Garros, was now being driven toward the most powerful address in France for a conversation that would become one of the defining milestones of her entire career. As the limousine approached the towering iron gates of the Elysee Palace, the station guards immediately stepped aside, allowing the car to roll forward across the historic stone pathway of the glowing courtyard where every detail felt entirely unreal under the golden lights. When Eala walked through the massive doors of the legendary Salon des Fêtes, the monumental hall where heads of state gather for official banquets and historic treaties beneath towering ceilings painted with elaborate frescoes and crystal chandeliers, she stopped in complete surprise because the enormous hall was nearly empty, featuring only a single intimate table set for 2 people near the center of the room, and standing beside it with a warm smile was French President Emmanuel Macron. Macron crossed the room with his hand extended, warmly thanking her for coming so late on the eve of her tournament because he could not let her begin her Roland Garros campaign without telling her something of immense importance. The noise of Paris and the crushing pressure of the draw completely disappeared inside that room as Eala shook his hand carefully, whispering that she was deeply honored, to which Macron replied that the honor was entirely his. The two settled into their chairs as a server quietly appeared to pour water into crystal glasses before vanishing into the shadows, leaving Macron to study her not as a politician examining a celebrity, but as someone genuinely fascinated by what her presence represents on the global stage. Macron leaned forward and stated that he had watched her recent matches in Rome, focusing not just on the tennis, but on the people, the waving flags, the emotional chants, the grown men crying after her victories, and the young children believing they belonged on that stage because of her. Macron explained that after decades in politics, he had seen movements form and leaders rise. But what is happening around her is a complete revolution that France desperately wants to be a part of. The words hit Eala harder than she expected, her breath catching as Macron reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a slim leather folder embossed with the official seal of the French Republic, sliding it gently across the polished table to reveal a government-funded proposal for a major cultural exchange program between France and the Philippines. The program was designed to provide fully funded scholarships for young aspiring Filipino athletes to train in France, study at elite sporting academies, and pursue international opportunities that once felt completely impossible, creating structured pathways similar to the one Eala herself took when she left the Philippines to train in Spain as a teenager, inspiring an entire generation to believe they belong on the world stage. Then Macron delivered the ultimate shock by calmly stating that this historic program would be officially named the Alex Eala Scholarship, causing her hand to instantly fly to her mouth in stunned silence as the president smiled, noting that this legacy would forever outlive rankings, trophies, and tennis championships. Eala stared at the elegant folder, completely overwhelmed by the realization that her journey had become vastly bigger than a single career, opening doors for countless young athletes who might now dream of following the path she once had to walk entirely alone. Macron watched her carefully through the emotional silence, refusing to pressure her for an immediate answer, allowing the enormity of the moment to settle into the quiet room before Eala finally whispered that she did not know what to say because this was far more than she ever imagined. Macron gave an understanding smile, reassuring her that she did not have to say anything tonight, as the offer would remain on the table long after the French Open, the grass season, and the United States Open, emphasizing that this was not a political negotiation or a publicity stunt, but a genuine invitation to become a permanent symbol of what happens when sport becomes an unstoppable movement of inspiration and hope. Eala lowered her eyes to her trembling hands and quietly admitted that she never asked to become a symbol and just wanted to play tennis, prompting Macron to nod slowly, stating that the people who truly change the world rarely ask for that heavy responsibility, just as Nelson Mandela and Mother Teresa never asked for their historic roles, because history simply chooses certain people whether they feel ready or not. He looked at her intently, stating that the world has officially chosen her, and asked whether she was willing to accept the responsibility that comes with that choice, making it clear that he was not asking her to become a politician or endorse his government policies, but simply to remain exactly who she already is by fighting hard on the court, carrying her flag proudly, and making her people feel seen. He gestured to the folder, explaining that the scholarship program would exist whether she accepted the invitation or not, because France is already fully committed to supporting the local Filipino community, but having her name and her blessing attached to it would tell every single young athlete in Southeast Asia that their dreams are not impossible because France believes in them. With emotion rising in her chest and her eyes glistening under the chandeliers, Ella took a slow breath and softly admitted that she needed time to think about it, a request Macron immediately granted before warmly changing the intense tone of the room, looking at the untouched plates and stating that they must finally eat since she had a massive tennis match tomorrow, and he had already kept her far too long. The heavy atmosphere of politics and legacy gradually dissolved into a light, personal dinner focused entirely on the human being behind the athlete, cementing a night of pure historical gravity. This is WTA Pro, and we are dedicated to bringing you the most exclusive, deeply accurate coverage of the tectonic shifts happening inside women's tennis today. If you want to stay ahead of the mainstream media and understand the true cultural impact of these rising stars, you need to subscribe right now and activate your notifications immediately. How far do you think the Alex Eala movement can push the sport of tennis? And do you believe she should accept this massive presidential invitation to become the face of France's new athletic scholarship? Drop your raw, unfiltered thoughts and analysis in the comments section below right now, because we are reading every single response and we will see you in the very next video.